When you think of Christmas, what images come to mind? Do you picture a blend of childhood memories and adult responsibilities, a mixture of church services and seculars, socializing, maybe bells and smells and traditional desserts, family gatherings, spiritual yearnings? Our personal snapshots of Christmas are as likely to be different from each other as we are different from each other. When you think about the first Christmas and its historical trappings, what pictures come to mind? Do you see shepherds and a star and a manger and 3 wise men and a baby in the straw? Well, it's likely most of us see something rather approximating what the person next to us here in the sanctuary also sees, because our mental pictures of Christmas have been shaped over the centuries by Sunday school pageants, religious art, Hallmark cards. And we need to ask, are these pictures consistent with the space-time event and what we might know of it when God chose to become a human being at Bethlehem? Well, we've got good news this morning, because it just so happens archaeologists have recently made the discovery of the century. They found a slide deck that's 2,000 years old. Now, this is thought to be the very first version of PowerPoint. You know, first century slides are not going to show up very well on 21st century technology, so we're not even going to put the screen up this morning, but I'm going to ask you to imagine a screen with me. I have seen this slide deck, and we can go through it together, picture by picture. Let's get started. All right, we begin right here, looking up at the screen. That's the town of Nazareth. It's so small. When Josephus, who was a contemporary of the Apostle Paul in the first century, wrote the list of all the communities that he knew in Galilee, he came up with 200 different names, and Nazareth didn't even make the cut. Notice that all the houses are right next to each other. They're all scrunched together. There aren't any front yards. There are no backyards. Everybody is in everybody's business, just like in small towns in the state of Indiana. There are parents and grandparents and relatives of many generations who have gone up and down those dusty streets for a very long time. All right, now we're looking in on a very solemn but joyful ceremony. This is the engagement of a young couple. They'll be married about 12 months from this day. Engagement is serious business. It's so serious, it requires both a civic and a religious component. The young man is named Joseph. He's about 18 years old, give or take. His fiancée is Mary. Let's zoom in on her face. There's not a line on it. Our best guess is that she's about 15 years old, so she's a freshman or a sophomore at an Indianapolis area high school. She's of childbearing age, so it's time to get married. If you live in a culture in which average mortality is 39 years, you immediately get into the arrangement of your own household. She's olive-skinned. Her hair is jet black. She's Jewish. That comes as such a surprise to some of us, especially when we compare that picture behind me to the nativity scene on the mantle at home, the one in which Mary and Joseph appear to be about 45 years old and are alabaster white. But these are not pale figures of fantasy. These are real teenagers. Here are their parents, and they are beaming. And why shouldn't they be? They arranged this couple when they were just toddlers. It's not as barbaric as you think. In truth, couples of arranged marriages at this period of history had the right to thumbs up or thumbs down what their parents had decided. They could go out on a couple of dates together, and if things were okay, then they would say, yes, we'll go ahead and make this happen. And they would have the confidence that one day, probably, they would even fall in love with each other. This is the big moment. Joseph offers Mary a cup of wine. If she receives it publicly in front of her family and his family and the authorities, that is the signal that the engagement is now official. Meanwhile, at the temple, it's about time for the genealogical records search. That's one reason why an engagement takes 12 months. It's a long process. Now, it would not be a surprise, especially in tribal Israel, for a bride and a groom to be related to each other in a variety of ways, but no one would want the kinship to be too close. The other reason for that 12-month period is to ensure that the bride was a morally pure person. See that playful smirk on Joseph's face? He knows he is marrying a woman of virtue. She's never been with anybody else. And he's also thinking about this: Uncle Ebenezer's timeshare condominium in Jericho. The perfect place for newlyweds to go to count blenders and toasters. Actually, couples did not look forward to something like that. They looked forward to this: living with the groom's parents for many, many years. How did the engagement ceremony end? The groom would turn to the bride and make some comments about the fact that he now had to go begin a construction project. Because if you were the married son in a family, you would be required under your father's tutelage to build a little alcove or extension or new room onto the family house. And that's why the groom would say to the bride, "In my father's house, there are many rooms. I go now to prepare a place for you, that where I am, you may also be. And I will come back and take you to myself." Gee, did those words sound a bit familiar? That's John chapter 14. Jesus, at the Last Supper, said to the disciples, his friends, the words that a Jewish groom traditionally spoke to his bride, saying, "In my Father's heavenly home, there's room for all of you." Let's take a closer look at Mary in a private moment. Notice that she's holding a lavender vase. That's an heirloom. Her great-grandmother actually made that. And her attention is being drawn to something right over here on this part of the slide. It's the beginning of light coming into the picture. Okay, this is not overexposed. This is the best we could do. There's light surrounding this experience, we think, because something supernatural is happening. An angel is identifying himself as a courier of the Lord. He's saying that Mary has been chosen, not because she's a celebrity. She's perfectly ordinary, so typical of God. He finds an ordinary person who will respond in an extraordinary way. You can see that the lavender vase has slipped through Mary's fingers. It's fallen and it's broken. She doesn't notice. She's saying, "Lord, I will do this. If you are in this, I will do this." And over in the corner, you can just begin to see that the light is fading. Several months have gone by. Here's Joseph. He's perturbed. He knows that his fiancée has been pensive lately, and he wants to know, has he done something to upset her? Have they found something in the temple genealogical search that is creating a concern? And now they're together, talking quietly. Do you realize this could be any couple? This could be any century. The scene has been repeated times without number. She says, I'm going to have a baby. He has no words. Do you see what's not in this picture? There are no halos. There are no auras. These are ordinary people facing the most dramatic moment in their young lives. Okay, Joseph has found his voice now. Let me get this straight, he begins. An angel appeared to you in this fifth-rate little cow town, and you're pregnant. Oh, but you're a virgin. And you're going to be the mother of the rescuer that our countrymen have been awaiting for 1,000 years. Did I get all that right? This is Joseph in his mind picturing all the men who are within walking distance of Nazareth. How could one of them do this? How could she do this? Joseph is not a poet. He's not a philosopher. He is a carpenter. He works with things that are solid and real with his own two hands, things that add up and make sense. This doesn't make sense. So it's decision time. If he stays with Mary, here's a certainty. Their reputations publicly will be shot. Their families will suffer public disgrace, probably for generations. The baby that will come will be known as a mamzer. That is a Jewish word for a child of an illegitimate coupling. The fact is that in this culture, honor means everything, and by staying with Mary, Joseph knows he's throwing away his honor, her families, and his families. So Joseph makes up his mind. He will do this quietly, he will do this compassionately, but he goes to the authorities and he's going to petition for a divorce because at this period of Jewish history, engagement is so serious, a divorce is required to terminate it. Here's Joseph a couple of weeks later, awakening from a dream. Now he has his own story to tell. Now he has heard from an angel. And he sees things very differently. He's going to take the fall publicly. He's going to stay with Mary, become her husband, and provide the care she needs because God is in the middle of this. Okay, just one more look at Joseph before we go. This guy is so ignored by most people. I mean, he's never even gotten his own Christmas carol. But he is a hero. He's kind of like, when you think about it, the father of the bride at a wedding. Nobody notices him after the first few scenes, but in the end, he has to pay for everything. All right, this slide I think is really interesting. I kind of think it might be the oldest slide in the entire deck. That's the Purdue football team the last time they were in a bowl game. My alma mater. Okay, let's go back to the first century. We're on the road to Bethlehem. I know. Okay, wipe away the pictures on the Christmas cards that you opened just this week. I know it showed Mary on a donkey, Joseph was holding the tether, and they were arriving in Bethlehem just as the sun is setting. Let's give these two some credit. They planned this trip for a long time. A census was not an immediate thing. Usually 6 to 12 months was provided for people to get to their towns of origin. So Mary and Joseph probably didn't arrive at the last minute. There are no donkeys mentioned in the Bethlehem accounts. It seems just as likely that an expectant mom might want to walk beside her husband instead of swaying on the back of a donkey for 60 miles from Nazareth down to Bethlehem. And it may be that the road was jammed with friends and relatives who were making the very same trip for the very same purpose. Next slide is blank. You don't have to keep looking up there. There's nothing there, nothing to see here. This slide is blank in memory of all of the Sunday school Christmas plays that have castigated the mean, uncaring, immovable innkeeper who turns the expectant couple away from his front door. The innkeeper, of course, always being played by the meanest kid in Sunday school. But if you read the Bible, there is no innkeeper. And there is no inn either. We have no evidence that a tiny village like Bethlehem ever had a lodge for travelers. Okay, I know what the Bible says, especially if you were weaned on King James and some of the more contemporary versions that maybe haven't taken advantage of a recent understanding by translators. We know they laid the baby in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. Except the word inn is the Greek word kataluma. It's used only one other time in the Gospel of Luke, and that's at the very end of the Gospel, where Jesus and his disciples share the Last Supper in an upper kataluma. The word kataluma means a room that is separate from the main part of a house. It's well translated many times in newer versions as guest room. This picture may help. Here is a classic Jewish home. And since this is the town of David, and since Mary and Joseph both come from the tribe of Judah, it's likely that there were lots of relatives with homes in this community, one of whom would surely take in a mom about to deliver a baby. Now, you can see right here, all right, a little bit closer, a typical house had a main room and then a bedroom off to the side, maybe several of those rooms that married sons had built for their brides. But a larger house would have a designated kataluma, a guest room. Many homes were split levels. That meant that you came out on the ground level, and then right in the center of the house, it would drop off and go to the back, and there would be a kind of a barn door in the back. Such homes still exist today, and you can walk into them in Galilee. What was that back door for? Well, your animals would come in at night for two reasons: for their own protection, and they would add warmth to the house. So if you owned a cow, it would provide all kinds of BTUs, that's bovine thermal units. Right in the middle of these houses, and again, they're visible today, would usually be a stone manger. A manger is a feeding trough. So the animals would be fed right there in the house, then go out again in the morning. And because there was no room in the kataluma, in the guest room, Mary takes her newborn, wraps him in strips of cloth, and places him in a feeding trough for animals. Now, that may not look like a lot of the Christmas cards that we've seen over the years, but it's entirely consistent with what the Gospel of Luke tells us. Meanwhile, outside there's a little band that's gathered, musicians, not exactly John, Paul, George, and Zechariah, but these people know that there's a little one coming into the world, and here was the tradition. If the father comes to the front door and says, "It's a boy," then they would begin to play music, and there'd be festivities and celebration. And if the father went to the front door and said, "Well, it's a girl," the musicians would offer their condolences. They would not play music, and they would go home. You know, it's sad that that culture so gravely underestimated and fundamentally misunderstood the value of little girls. But how wonderful that God changed the world not through the cleverness and the might of some man, but through the extraordinary obedience and willingness of one young woman, one ordinary young woman. It's later in the evening now, and you can see shepherds and sheep beginning to gather around the house. That's kind of weird. These were the bluest of blue collars at this time. These folks were not highly respected. They were just about the group of people that you would never invite to a party. Shepherds were not even permitted to testify in public trials because it was assumed they were incapable of telling the truth. Historians, however, suggest that these particular shepherds may well have been tending the king's flocks, the sheep that would have been coming up and down the road from Jerusalem, which was not very far away. And they, of all people this night, are given a private audience with the true king. I love this slide. This is a picture of the very first Hallmark Christmas movie. That young woman has fallen in love with a prince, but she doesn't know he's a prince. They're having a misunderstanding right now, but it's all going to be worked out in the last 12 minutes. Let's go on. Speaking of royalty, here's the fellow people love to boo, Herod the Great. Herod was half Gentile, so his Jewish subjects did not trust him. He was half Jewish, so the Romans could not stand him. What both groups agreed is that Herod was a monster. He had either 10 or 11 wives. Apparently, it's possible to lose count. And in a suspicious rage, he killed Mariamne. That was the only wife he genuinely loved. He ordered the violent deaths of one of his mothers-in-law, 2 brothers-in-law, and 2 of his own sons, and even his old barber who had spoken up quietly on behalf of his boys. Here's Herod lying in his gilded bed. This is the most important day of his life, and he doesn't know it. Isn't that true that we can be lying in bed some morning and it's the biggest thing that's ever going to happen to us and we have no clue because we just don't see it coming? This is the day that visitors will come to his palace. He will learn that a new king has been born in Israel, delivered by these fellows. And it's too bad some sand got into the lens, apparently, obscuring this picture, so we can't resolve a mystery, and that is, how many magi were there really? Well, the Bible doesn't say. They presented 3 gifts, and traditionally that became 3 kings or wise men, but we don't know their number, and we don't even fundamentally have an understanding of what might have prompted them to come. They were apparently stargazers who were able to discern that some extraordinary power connected with the Jewish people had lined up things to herald a royal birth. Herod is the only king in town these days, and he is not exactly excited about things like this. He does everything he can to eliminate the competition. So this is Herod grimly ordering the deaths of all the little boys of age 2 and younger in the vicinity of Bethlehem. And this is something of a clue. Since the Bible tells us Herod did this in accordance with the time told him by the Magi, it's likely, it's possible at least, that Jesus is now a toddler. Lots of time has gone by. Shepherds and Magi, chronologically, probably don't belong in the same nativity set at the same time. So when you go home, you can take the 3 wise men and put them on the other side of your family room alongside the Christmas catalogs with those updated versions of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Last slide. This is the really big one. It's a throne. It's a lot nicer throne than anything Herod ever sat on. This is the throne of your heart. Somebody gets to sit on it. Who's that going to be? Here's a really strange irony. If you think you're somebody special and choose to occupy that place by yourself, then you are destined, in a sense, to have what might be called an ordinary existence. But if you let Jesus take the throne of your heart because you know that you are just, in fact, one of his ordinary people, well, he is the king of everything that is, then you have been chosen. You also have been chosen to be God's deeply loved child in this world and the next. That's what makes this the most important snapshot of Christmas. Who gets to sit on the throne of your life? Your private album won't be complete until you provide an answer to that question.